Project 2025 is a policy blueprint developed by conservative think tanks and organizations in the United States to influence federal government policy starting in 2025. Spearheaded by the Heritage Foundation and supported by dozens of conservative groups, Project 2025 is intended to reshape federal agencies, reduce the administrative state's size, and implement conservative principles across a range of issues, including environmental regulation, education, healthcare, and immigration. Supporters believe the initiative will streamline government, restore executive authority, and align federal policies with conservative ideals, while critics warn it could undermine established regulations, weaken social and environmental protections, and increase partisanship within the federal workforce. Here's an in-depth look at Project 2025 and its potential implications for U.S. policy and governance. 1. Overview of Project 2025. Project 2025 is a strategic plan for implementing conservative priorities through presidential power and reshaping the federal government if a conservative president takes office in 2025. This policy agenda is described in the Mandate for Leadership report, which covers over 900 pages and details steps to reform numerous federal agencies and policy areas. The project calls for decisive action to dismantle what it describes as an overly expansive, unaccountable administrative state where regulatory agencies have accumulated power beyond constitutional boundaries. Primary goals of Project 2025: reduce the size and scope of federal government. By reorganizing federal agencies and limiting regulatory authority, Project 2025 aims to reduce the federal footprint. Reassert executive control. The project emphasizes strengthening presidential authority over the federal workforce, aiming to make federal employees more directly accountable to the president. Reshape policy. According to conservative values, across sectors like environmental policy, immigration, healthcare, and education, Project 2025 proposes conservative-driven policy reforms. Expedite appointments and staffing. The project includes plans to rapidly fill thousands of political positions with loyal conservatives, including Schedule F positions, which are exempt from traditional civil service protections. The plan envisions a federal government that operates under strict executive control, prioritizes conservative policy objectives, and limits the influence of career bureaucrats, who are often viewed by conservatives as obstacles to reform. Number 2. Key policy areas and proposed changes. Project 2025 targets various aspects of federal policy, each with its own conservative reforms. Here are some of the most significant areas targeted by the project and their potential changes. A. Environmental policy. Reducing environmental regulations. Project 2025 proposes scaling back federal environmental protections and regulatory power, particularly within the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. The aim is to reduce what conservatives consider burdensome regulations on businesses, such as emissions controls and water protection standards. Climate policy rollbacks. The project includes measures to withdraw from or weaken climate-related policies, viewing federal climate regulations as overly restrictive to energy independence. It prioritizes oil, gas, and coal production over renewable energy initiatives. Delegating environmental authority to states. Project 2025 advocates shifting more environmental regulation authority to state governments, giving states more control over natural resource management. Implications. Critics argue that loosening environmental regulations could lead to increased pollution, environmental degradation, and setbacks in combating climate change. Supporters contend it will ease regulatory burdens on industries and reduce energy costs. B. Education. Parental rights and curriculum control. Project 2025 emphasizes parents' rights over educational content and seeks to curb what it describes as progressive influences in public schools. This includes opposing gender identity education, critical race theory, and other social justice-oriented curricula. School choice expansion. The initiative proposes expanding school choice through vouchers, charter schools, and other alternatives to traditional public education, aiming to allow parents greater control over where their children go to school. Federal Department of Education downsizing. Project 2025 includes proposals to reduce the federal role in education, limiting the Department of Education's influence and shifting authority to state and local governments. Implications. Proponents argue that these reforms will empower parents, promote educational freedom, and eliminate political bias in schools. Opponents fear these changes could undermine public education quality and reduce support for underserved communities. C. Healthcare. Reducing government influence in healthcare. Project 2025 includes plans to decrease federal involvement in healthcare, favoring privatized and market-driven solutions. This includes a potential rollback of Affordable Care Act (ACA) provisions, giving states more control over Medicaid, and promoting private insurance. Emphasis on religious and moral exemptions. The plan seeks to expand religious and moral exemptions for healthcare providers, especially concerning reproductive rights, LGBTQ+ healthcare, and end-of-life care. Implications. While supporters see this as a return to personal choice and market-based healthcare, critics argue it could result in reduced access to healthcare for low-income individuals, weakened protections for patients, and increased costs. D. Immigration tightening, border security. Project 2025 emphasizes heightened border security and strict enforcement of immigration laws, with a focus on limiting unauthorized entry and deporting those without legal status. Revamping the asylum process. The project aims to make it more challenging for asylum seekers to obtain entry, reducing the number of individuals eligible for refugee status in the U.S. Expanding deportation efforts. The plan includes measures to accelerate deportations, particularly for individuals with criminal records or those overstaying visas. Implications. Supporters believe these reforms will enhance national security and uphold the rule of law. Critics argue that restrictive immigration policies could disrupt families, harm refugees, and strain international relations. E. Federal workforce and Schedule F. Implementing Schedule F. One of Project 2025's most controversial proposals is reintroducing Schedule F, a job classification that would allow the president to hire and fire certain federal employees without standard civil service protections. This would include career professionals in regulatory and policy-making positions. Increasing presidential control. The initiative aims to bring federal employees in critical positions directly under presidential control, bypassing traditional nonpartisan protections to align the workforce with the president's agenda. Implications. Proponents argue that this change will allow for a more accountable and responsive federal workforce. Opponents fear it could politicize civil service, lead to widespread purges, and erode institutional expertise. Number 3. Broader implications and criticisms. Project 2025 represents a major shift in conservative strategy, focusing not just on policy, but on restructuring federal governance to entrench conservative values. This vision has significant implications: increased partisanship and politicization. Critics argue that Project 2025 could increase partisanship within the federal government, with the potential to turn civil service positions into politically driven roles. This could undermine the traditional nonpartisan nature of federal agencies, affecting the consistency of federal programs. Threat to environmental and social protections. Detractors warn that Project 2025's environmental, healthcare, and social policy rollbacks could result in weakened protections for vulnerable populations, the environment, and underserved communities. Centralization of executive power. Project 2025's emphasis on presidential control over the federal workforce could set a precedent for expanded executive authority, limiting checks and balances within the government. Support for conservative values. Supporters argue that Project 2025 would counteract what they see as a leftward drift in federal agencies, which they claim have adopted progressive policies without proper oversight or democratic mandate. They believe this project will restore executive accountability, reduce bureaucratic overreach, and implement policies aligned with conservative values. 4. Public and political reactions. Public reaction to Project 2025 has been polarized, reflecting broader divisions in American politics. Supporters on the right hail it as a necessary recalibration of government that will ensure the executive branch aligns with the will of the people. Many see it as a long overdue effort to reduce the power of federal agencies they feel have overstepped their constitutional boundaries. On the other hand, critics see Project 2025 as an attempt to concentrate power, dismantle crucial protections, and reshape the federal government to serve a partisan agenda. The potential reintroduction of Schedule F has been particularly contentious, with opposition viewing it as a direct threat to the integrity and independence of the civil service. If implemented, Project 2025 could lead to a transformative shift in U.S. governance, one that could redefine the role and influence of the federal government for decades. Whether this shift ultimately benefits or harms American society will depend on one's perspective on the role of government, the importance of nonpartisan civil service, and the balance between state and federal powers.